Suswagatam, Namaste, and welcome to Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. And it is India time, 8 p.m. on Sunday, and we welcome you back to our show. We last Sunday on the 19th of December, we skipped a show because of logistic and travel reasons of Dr. Swamy and other members of the VHS team. And we are back today to discuss a very interesting episode, that is Quad versus BRICS. Where does India stand? And we have with us two important guests along with Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who will be discussing this issue. We have Professor M.D. Nalapat, who has been on our show earlier. He's a journalist, professor, and expert in foreign affairs, defense, and national security matters, and been associated with the NewsX and the Guardian, Sunday Guardian group of newspapers. We also have Sree Iyer, who's an inventor turned author and having 38 patents based in California, and he is the man behind P Gurus, the famous website. We thank our viewers for your support, which we have been getting. Our 12th December issue, which was the last episode we had on our channel, was on the latest development on India-China relations, where journalist Ananta Krishnan was present and they discussed it with Dr. Swamy. And our viewership for this program has crossed 61,000 viewers across various channels. As you all know, we are available on various social media platform, podcast, and other social media channels. So we thank our viewers across the globe for the support they have been giving us for our viewership and for the views which we express in our program. I have to thank my co-host, Professor Arvind Chaturvedi from Delhi, and my friend Ramesh Swamy for their support. And I also have to thank our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, Vishal Mehta, and Ajesh Nair for the background support for putting this program together. So with these words, it's over to Dr. Subramanian Swamy to initiate the discussion on today's important topic, Quad versus BRICS. Where does India stand? Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Jagdish, and welcome to all the participants. My job will be give a background, because there are a lot of people who have seen these pneumonyms, as they are called, or whatever, these brief words like Quad and BRICS, and they want to know what it's, how it came to be, and what is the background. So I'll give the background today before asking Nalapat and Sree Iyer to give us, and then of course the panel that is here will all discuss together. First of all, I'd like to say that BRICS was formed as BRIC because there were only 4 countries to begin with: Brazil, Russia, India, China. That was in 2006. And then in 2010, South Africa also joined, so it's now called BRICS. And essentially, the core objective of BRICS, as stated, is economic cooperation and policies to dominate global growth, how to integrate ourselves together and dominate global growth and take over the entire Western world in economy by 2050. This is how it started. And the first summit meeting formally took place on June 16th, 2010. 2009. And of course, from our side, Manmohan Singh participated. Now, if you look at the enormity of BRICS, it's 41% of the total world's population it represents. Of course, India and China make 37%, but still together they constitute 41%. And you will find that India and China together constitute 24% of the world's GDP, 16% of the world trade, and 29.3% of the total geographical area of the world. So this is a very substantial group in terms of the numbers. The question is how they're going to function, how they have functioned, and how they will function in the future. That's the key thing that that will be considered. Now, Quad was formed in 2007. Remember that BRICS was founded in 2006, and Quad was formed in 2007 as US, India, Japan, and Australia. These four. And the after the general elections in Australia, pro-Chinese, as is popularly called, alleged, I don't know if it's true or not, in 2008, Australia withdrew. And then after another general election, the Australians returned again. So Australians are back in Quad. So it's a Quad. It's for four countries, US, India, Japan, and Australia. Now, in 2012, the Japanese Prime Minister became a little more ambitious, and he wanted this to be called the Democratic Security Diamond. He really basically felt that Quad should be a force for fighting undemocratic countries. And therefore, with this in mind, a meeting took place in 2017 in Philippines. But except the fact that the objectives of Quad was not purely economic as the BRICS is, but it also included military aspects, securing sea lanes. Of course, they said that is for the commercial traffic, but then you have to use military force for this purpose. And so, therefore, the military has to be involved. Then the focus of Quad throughout in its idiom has been anti-Chinese. And the interesting part is China also is vociferously against the Quad. And it is it has pointed out that Bangladesh, which wanted to join Quad, was not allowed because it was considered too close to China by some countries in the Quad. So, therefore, Quad formulated four particular objectives. First objective was a rule-based global order. That is an orderly thing where everybody follows the same rules. It's an ambitious goal, but it's a worthwhile goal. Freedom of navigation, especially for commercial traffic, and a liberal trading regime where all these barriers to trade and all and export import is removed. So in that context, we have to see which is of these two is going to succeed, because they're clearly not working on the same plane. Now, there is one problem: the BRICS. First of all, it's overly dominated by just two countries, India and China, population-wise. But economically, China is far ahead as of now of the other BRICS countries. And therefore, the room for trade of China with these countries, where exports manufacturing products, but also imports manufactured products, so that both countries benefit. And not like today, for example, India, most of China are manufactured goods, and bulk of India's exports to China is raw material. For instance, the metals that are dug up, then jewels, and so many other these raw things which can be processed in China and exported elsewhere. So we find most of the trade that China is having to other countries is to sell its manufacturing products and receive in return the raw materials which are needed for the manufacture of this. So it's a country, unless there is a physical or a mental domination of China, I don't think that even with India there, BRICS is going to have a smooth sailing. It's going to be a rickety thing. And I would say that India would perhaps be the most difficult position because it has to choose. No other country has to choose. Brazil doesn't have to choose. South Africa doesn't have to choose. But India has to choose either BRICS or Quad. And so that's what the topic today is. Where should India be? And we have got two people who are experts, knowledgeable, independent minded. And so I think we can begin the discussion with with this. Can India survive in BRICS with a dominant China? Two, can India be called, be a force for democracy in the company of BRICS? Will Quad mean India will have to participate in military issues of Japan and Australia and leave alone the United States, or that it will be only a way to guide the United Nations? So these are some of the big issues arising. For India, what do we have to, what would we choose? Because it's not going to be easy to continue very much longer in both places. And the Chinese rhetoric getting more and more extreme, and the fact that the Chinese have come into our territory in a big way, I think we have to make a choice. And what should be the choice? Over to Mr. Nalapat and then to our friend Sree Iyer. Okay, well, Mr. Nalapat, Professor Nalapat, please
Yes.
enlighten us on what you think.
Uh, Thank you very much. I think you have enlightened us sufficiently about both these organizations, and I don't think anybody can improve upon that. I'd only like to point out that you have the UN Security Council. Now, the assumption behind the United Nations Bretton Woods system was that Franklin Roosevelt was around during that time. Roosevelt was an individual who believed that you could bring Russia and the United States together, and he worked comfortably with Russia during the war. In fact, America made a significant contribution to winning the war by providing Russia with a huge amount of armaments and other assistance. But soon after that, you had the Cold War. You had the Cold Warriors, on both sides. There was a fear that Stalin would not be satisfied with Eastern Europe. He would try and expand into Western Europe. And more importantly, across Africa, South America, parts of Asia, Stalin was supporting the local communist parties. So the Cold War began, and the UN Security Council, the 5 members there, were in effect split. You had on the one hand Russia, and on the other hand you had the other 4 countries, because from the 1970s, effectively, China was on the side of the United States, France, and Britain against Russia. So the Russia was alone, but they had the veto. So you had that split between Russia on the one hand and the other 4 countries on the other. Now, uh, so far as BRICS is concerned, well, when the Goldman Sachs chap came up with this concept of BRIC, and I think if you recall, there was an op-ed in the China Daily, and that op-ed said, "Why don't we bring South Africa into the Quad as well? I mean, into BRICS as well." Now, I'm not going to name the person who wrote that particular op-ed, but possibly Dr. Swamy, you and others in this particular show know him very well. Anyway, South Africa was made a member because you can't keep the African continent out of BRICS, and therefore it became from BRIC into BRICS, as you very correctly said. The reality is today that there is a cleavage in BRICS. You have China on the one hand, you have Russia, whether by default, mostly by default, with China, and then you have India, South Africa, and Brazil, frankly, on one side. Now, Brazil is not, in a sense, fronting the Indo-Pacific, but Brazil is definitely not on the side of China, nor is it on the side of Russia. It's much more on the side of India. And South Africa also has got a very strong personal interest in a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Rather than Indo-Pacific that is dominated by a single power, a free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific is very important to South Africa. And may I say Brazil as well. So you have these three countries. You have South Africa, India, and Brazil. And on the other hand, you have Russia and China. Now, what is happening now? In the UN Security Council, for some time, America was ascendant. Russia was really, after 1991, the Soviet Union was finished. So for about 12 to 15 years, Americans really ran the show in the UNSC. Yeltsin found it very difficult to stand up against the United States. He hardly did so. It's only when Putin came at the close of the last century that Russia, after some time, began to realize that it had to basically take a strong stand. So the reality of the situation is, frankly, that in the UN Security Council, for some time you had untrammeled American power. Untrammeled. No other country could challenge America. The Chinese were with the Americans, and the Chinese were with the Americans for very good reasons. They wanted to develop their own country, and the best way was tagging on to the Americans, and the Americans, the Taiwanese, and the Japanese, all of whom are now in the targets of China, of Xi Jinping. All three are the countries that did the most to make China what it is today. Of course, the wise diplomacy of Dr. Swamy's friend, Deng Xiaoping, was also very much responsible for that. There's no question about it. Deng was a genius in geopolitics. I mean, I don't think he would have consented to be a professor, but I'd like to say that he was a brilliant geopolitical expert. And you have to be a geopolitical expert if you want to run a country the size of China or India or Brazil or Russia or the United States effectively. You have to understand the currents and cross currents of geopolitics. So what I want to say is that in BRICS, the initial assumption was India is going to rise very fast. Russia is rising very fast. Remember, oil prices were shooting up during that time. China was definitely, rising very fast. And as a consequence, in BRIC, what happened was all four countries were doing pretty well. China, of course, had a head start because it started its rise by the early 80s. India, after again Dr. Swamy's close friend P.V. Narasimha Rao took over, and that was back in 1992. But India also was doing pretty well but over the last, I would say, decade or so, we see that Russia is not doing too well, economically at least. Brazil is not doing too well, not doing well at all. India also, because of various factors, India also, that early glow of significant economic progress is not there. And in the meantime, China, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, China has been racing ahead. Recently, it's faced some speed bumps caused by largely because of its own approach in the new era. But the reality is China is today head and shoulders above any of the other three partners of BRICS. And may I say, the other four partners of BRICS, and they are bigger, if I may say so, as an economy than all the other four partners combined by far. So this is the situation. I mean, you call it BRICS. It should be CCCC and then BRS or something, because it is dominated by China. Much more than the United States dominated the UNSC, China is today dominating BRICS. Now, what does that mean? During the time when the US was dominating, the UNSC, Narasimha Rao tried very hard to become friendly with the United States. And frankly, Bill Clinton was not the smartest man on the planet, except where getting himself elected and re-elected was concerned. He was very good on that. And he knew what policies to follow to make sure the majority of the American people supported him. But Bill Clinton did two cardinal mistakes. One, Russia wanted to enter into the zone of influence of the United States, the zone of influence that included Western Europe. And Gorbachev has started this thing about a common European home. Yeltsin also talked about a common European home. And may I say, for the first 4 to 6 years of his rule, Putin also started talking about a common European home, except when he realized that the Europeans did not want him in a home. They wanted him, frankly, in a pit, because they wanted Russia to be a pastoral country. No technology, nothing. When he realized that, of course, he forgot about the common European home and turned to Eurasia. And Russia is the quintessential Eurasian power. I've always said Russia is neither European nor Asian. It's Eurasian. And of course, Dr. Swamy and Sree Iyer, in a sense, we are all Eurasians. We are all Eurasians now, especially. But I want to say that given this situation, BRICS is today dominated by a single country, which is China. Now, the point about China learns very fast how to do something which another country has perfected. Sree Iyer would have, knows that extremely well. He's tracked that technology sphere, how China used to buy up American tech companies, and then the Chinese companies the tech would be completely taken away, and the Chinese would then come forward with their own tech, which was as good as the American company that they had taken over. And that American company will frankly be thrown by the roadside. Its people will be its workers will be thrown away. So the reality of the situation is Bill Clinton said, no, Russia cannot join. And he wanted to continue with the pastoralization of Russia. And India, he wanted India. He said, you're a third world power. I mean, I wrote an op-ed in Times of India in the early 90s, the thumb of Ekalavya. And I said, India is Ekalavya. We learned the hard way how to become a nuclear and missile power. And Ekalavya cut off his thumb. In my view, Ekalavya ought not to have done that. He should have cut off the thumb of the individual who told him to cut off his thumb. But he was too civilized to do that. But having learned from Ekalavya's mistake, I said, we cannot be the Ekalavya. We cannot cut off our nuclear thumb. We cannot cut off our missile, fingers. We can't do that. Just because Bill Clinton says, we're not going to welcome you. You're going to welcome us without a thumb, without fingers, when we are bleeding on the ground? What kind of a welcome is that? So the fact is, Bill, and don't forget, Dr. Swamy, and my good dear friend Sree, it was during Bill Clinton's 8 years in office that both Wahhabism and China grew by leaps and bounds. 9/11, the seeds of 9/11 were sown by Clinton's decision in 1996 to bring the Taliban to power on a red carpet. It is Bill Clinton, the American president. Forget the Pakistanis. Pakistanis have always been hired hands of people. They have never had a mind of their own. They essentially are for hire, for rent, the Pakistan military, not the Pakistan people, the Pakistan military. So, so the reality situation is that under Clinton, India also was rebuffed. Narasimha Rao faced intense pressure on Kashmir. There was a very strong insurgency. It was supported by China. It was supported by the United States. Who can forget that Assistant Secretary of State Robin Raphael going there and trying to create more and more trouble more and more violence against India in an open fashion. She didn't hide it. And she had the full support of Bill Clinton. Clinton completely backed her. So you had China, you had the United States, and a very weak Russia that frankly could not help you as it helped in the past. But Narasimha Rao navigated this in a very skillful manner. And those of us who had the privilege of knowing him, Dr. Swamy has had that privilege to a much lesser extent. I have had that privilege. We admired the way he steered India through that difficult Clinton period until finally even Clinton realized that you've got to deal with India. And he finally made a visit to India in the very last months, in the very last year of his 8 years in power. And of course, in India, somehow in the Lutein zone, the more you damage India, the more you hurt India, the more welcome you are. So he got a tremendous welcome in India, even though he was in my view, one of the most anti-Indian presidents in the United States. What I want to say, Dr. Swamy and Sree Iyer, is very simple. So far as BRICS is concerned, let us admit the fact it's a Chinese construct. Effectively, it's a Chinese construct. China will not allow BRICS to do anything beyond serve its own geopolitical interest. Now, we may, claim that no, we are strong. We have 1.4 billion people. Yes, but I'm afraid their economy is 5 times more. And unfortunately, in this world, it's the economy that counts. I mean, Bill Clinton said it's the economy is stupid. I'm not going to use any adjective, but I would like to say it's the economy that counts. So let's be honest. We're not going to get much of a diplomatic dividend from BRICS. But at the same time, let's keep on it because geopolitics is a fluctuating science. It's a fluctuating situation. It's a fluctuating equilibrium. And possibly a time may come in which Russia perhaps may realize the future path lies with India rather than with China. And the Americans and the Europeans will be smart enough to understand that Russia is a force multiplier to the greatest threat they are facing, an existential threat, which is China. That may happen. Definitely South Africa and Brazil will be there. So possibly that time will come. So frankly, I am not in favor of leaving BRICS, but I would like to say a very strong reality check. If any person in India, official India or non-official India, thinks BRICS is going to be of any value to India, so long as China is as dominant in BRICS as it is today, well, forget about it. It's like the UN Security Council. In effect, India has the same position there, let's say, as Botswana or Lesotho or something. You may get Botswana elected to the UN Security Council, you may get Lesotho, but in terms of law, we are one of the many members of the General Assembly. We are not among the permanent 5 in the UNSC. And frankly, I think it is frankly a reflection on the UN, not on India, that a country of 1.4 billion intensely talented people as yet has not become part of the UNSC, and we will never become part of the UNSC so long as China remains under President Xi Jinping. I can tell you that very clearly. Any effort that we make to try and join the UNSC as a permanent member, very, very frankly, so long as Xi Jinping is the General Secretary of the party, and he is now General Secretary for life, it's a waste of diplomatic effort. Like it's a waste of diplomatic effort to be thinking that BRICS will be of any value to India. We have to put all our efforts into ensuring that BRICS does not harm India in the way the Chinese want every single institution. When I say Chinese, I mean the Chinese Communist Party led by the current crop of leaders. I don't mean China. I don't mean even the Communist Party. They've done a lot of good for China. Deng did that, definitely. And both Jiang and Hu carried that forward. But definitely I would like to say my expectation of BRICS and the UNSC is extremely low. Extremely low. At the same time, Should we walk out? No. We should remain, because in a dynamic situation, if the right policies are followed, very, very frankly, if the right tactics are followed, well, we can leapfrog in this, in this 2021, 2030 to 2031, the way China leapfrogged 1981 to 1991.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nalapat. You've thrown in many ideas. We'll get back to it after hearing Sree Iyer. But before I hand it over to Sree Iyer, let me pose one point to you. As far as BRICS is concerned, you made a very strong case why we are not going to get anything much out of it. But you said you should continue, nevertheless, being a member of BRICS. Then, on the question of Quad, the other three members, they are all connected to each other by military alliance. Japan is a military ally of China, United States. So is Australia. And so India is the only country there which has no formal alliance, military alliance with the United States. So why not think of, instead of being in both, as you are suggesting, when we get to the discussion after hearing Sree Iyer, why not India forms with their neighbors, our neighbors, another body which has relationships and an understanding with other democratic countries, such as the Quad countries, to deal with the menace of dictatorship which Xi Jinping today represents. Now, you have mentioned about Xi Jinping, and you are a good friend of the values that Mr. Narendra Modi stands for, and you support him. You write. Could you explain how he couldn't figure out what Xi Jinping was after 18 meetings with him, and that too one-to-one, some of them extending for hours and hours? So after hearing Sree Iyer, kindly answer these two questions. Should we not form a third pole and not be with either of the two, but lean in favor of the democratic countries? One, and two, why is it that we never figured out Xi Jinping in 18 times that you met him? What was the why is it you didn't give him good advice, or the others didn't give him good advice, or what was the reason? We need to understand. We can't be taken for a ride again. Okay, over to you, Sree Iyer. Now it's all yours. You look like as if
Thank
you
you
are
very
in
much, Dr.
Pangbang Lake. You look as if you are already in Chinese territory.
No, sir, I'm actually in Kashmir Valley with a horse farm, and their horses are freely grazing. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be at VHS expressing my thoughts. And I just want to kind of give you my read on these two groupings, Quad and BRICS. And let's start with BRICS. The recent events sort of indicate that Putin may not exactly be towing China's line. A couple of instances to show that. One is that Putin has stopped selling aircraft engines. Now you can say, hey, what is the big deal? China already has their own aircraft. But it is considered a big deal because some of these things can, in the long run, have a detrimental effect. But for Putin to do that means that he has a plan B in his pocket. The other thing is that Russia right now is sort of like doing something which is to best expressed as creating noise in one direction while they are trying to do something else. And this is to me still a puzzle why Russia is supporting Belarus, which in turn is allowing plane loads of people from Turkey to come there and then start permeating into Western Europe. Now this is what people are saying is they are doing all this noise creation there so that they can invade Ukraine. Why Ukraine? Russia wants to control the natural gas pipelines from Russia to the west, that is Europe, as well as to the Eastern Europe sector. But will they succeed in this? That is the point. And in this, what is Russia's role in BRICS? I'm not so sure that Russia is really keen on doing what Xi Jinping wants Putin to do. Otherwise, he would have not done that. And here is the other interesting thing. I've heard that in the last few visits, whenever Putin comes visiting China, the first person he visits is Jiang Zemin, not Xi Jinping. I mean, this is open, sir. I mean, this is interesting stuff. Why is he thinking that it is Jiang Zemin who calls the shots even now? Up until Hu Jintao, yes. But Xi Jinping is a bit of a maverick in that respect. And the question now is, will the deep state in China unseat Xi Jinping and put somebody else in power? If that happens, then the equation between Russia and China, and perhaps US and China also might change. So we have to wait and see. So this is as far as my read of the BRICS is concerned. Everybody, both of you have captured the China's the power position. However, in military terms, China has kind of rattled US, in my opinion, doing two things. One is that USS Connecticut submarine. However, US keeps saying that it hit an uncharted seamount, the amount of damage it has suffered, one. And the second is the fact that a Chinese submarine from the same area was found going through Taiwan Straits and it had to surface. So the big story that's being constructed, and I'm not sure yet if this is going to be accepted by both parties, is that Chinese submarine went and hit from the bottom the USS Connecticut, which is electronically the most advanced nuclear submarine. Why? Because the USS Connecticut was sitting at the mouth of the Hainan Island, where most of the Chinese nuclear submarines are parked. So this is something that we have to see. But the problem there is US has suffered some damage there. On top of that, China tested its hypersonic missile. And US has come out and said, we have to play catch up in this. So the US as a military power is now suddenly feeling that it has some catching up to do. Whether this happened in Biden's watch or in Trump's watch, I can't say. But now China is showing that we've got a few cards up our sleeve too. Now, you go back to like the time when Biden came to power. Trump was a rah-rah guy for Quad. He wanted Quad. He was very supportive of it. He had 2+2 talks, and the then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had come to India, and he had promised a lot of things. I think US gave India some drones and other surveillance equipment so that the Galwan area, India could have a better sighting of what China was up to. But when Biden came, we don't know what kind of a backroom deal was done, but clearly Biden had given a free pass to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, led by the maverick person, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not coming out, but you can see all the minions making a lot of noise. Now, what has happened is perhaps the progressive sector lobby has chewed more than what it can, have bitten more than what they can chew. And now you have the most fundamental thing that would have helped most of America looking like it's going to fail. It's called Build Back Better. This is the infrastructure package, and that is not going through. And so what I'm trying to say here is, while America looked like it was turning India away from Quad, in my opinion, it was the internal, fights that were going on inside the Biden administration. We have to always remember that up to 44 people in the current Biden administration are Pak sympathizers, Pakistani sympathizers. We have 3 or 4 Indian American people also, but they want to be model American citizens. They don't want to say anything about India. And the one poor US ambassador who came and visited Mohan Bhagwatji in RSS headquarters in Nagpur got an earful from some, nonsense Democrat who probably can't even spell many of the Indian names. So the point here is,
he was pushed out from his job also from the State Department, I think.
it's very, very sad. It's very sad when something like that happens. Clearly, the Indian Americans have to find their voices. I, for one, am doing what I can to try and bring awareness. The most disappointing thing is US kind of took his eyes off the ball as far as China is concerned. And they were very focused on extracting their forces from Afghanistan. And I believe, and I don't know if you two gentlemen agree with me or not, I believe India missed a trick when US came asking, look, we just want 10,000 or 5,000 of your troops guarding the city of Kabul. And we will do an orderly extract. And you guys, we will give you all the weaponry. We'll leave everything there. You are welcome to do it. We just want this to be done in an orderly way. I think United States got tired of paying the government of Afghanistan, the workers, the banks, the military for 20 long years, sir. 9/11 was 20 years ago. This might have been one consideration that US said, what are we paying these people this money for? So at that point, India should have grabbed the opportunity with both hands. We have to look at history. Hannibal was not defeated in Rome. He was defeated in his own land. The Romans went back to where he lived, and that's where they defeated him. And here India is now facing the prospect of enhanced, probably amplified terrorism from the very people that they could have kept under control if they had taken up on US's offer. Now, $80 billion worth of equipment, surely some of that, these guys will reverse engineer and use it against who? Against India. So right now, America is not very, well inclined towards India, saying that, look, you guys promise something, then you go back on your promises. This is something that Mr. Modi has to answer. Did he say that he will put boots on the ground? Because when General McMaster came asking for help, the then defense minister and the current finance minister made a statement as if she was on NDTV. No. Why would you do something like that? Why would a general come all the way from US if he had not already got indications that India was going to do that? I mean, this thing about 15% of India is Muslim. Afghanistan is also Muslim. 15% of India is Sunni. So is Afghanistan. I mean, this kind of a backward thinking that happens in the Babudam, I can't imagine why India missed that trick. Now, India is going to spend more money just staying in place because they have to fortify themselves. You also have the National Security Advisor saying that India needs to look internally for most of its trouble. And lo and behold, the CDS's helicopter has crashed. It's now 2 weeks since the black box was recovered. I don't expect anyone to say anything. Saying one way or the other way is going to hurt India, so they won't say anything. But the point is the morale of the Indian Army, the Indian Navy, and the Indian Air Force, I'm sure, has taken a beating. All I can say is, for their sake, they need to find out what really went wrong there. So that's where I think things stand now. However, should India ask America for help, I think America will come to India's help, but the price will not be as reasonable as if India had helped Afghanistan in Kabul. This is my limited thing, and I also have some positive from US. US has not done any CAATSA sanctions against India yet, because it is my belief that US understands that there is other problems that it is not able to solve, primarily to achieve military parity with China. Dr. Swamy, there's a bigger problem for US. US may say, okay, fine, we will help you, provided you be the boots on the ground in fighting the Chinese. Maybe to take Tibet, I don't know, I'm just saying. For at that point, India should not back down. India needs to say yes, because we can't spend our hard-earned tax dollars, middle income taxpayers' tax dollars on buying more equipment, laying roads that probably are not going to be inhabited much. So this is something that might happen. I'm hoping it will happen. We will try and do our best to make it happen. Thank you.
Good. I think we should ask reactions from my colleagues also. Ramesh, what happened to Arvind Chaturvedi and our Jagdish Shetty? They are here. Let's hear from them. Ramesh, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I just have one question. Given that this new aggression that Russia's, there is some feedback anyway, sorry. Given that Russia's aggression in Ukraine now and they're backing out, US might be looking at sanctions. How would India being a part of the Quad, support it or not? And what would be India's position? Go ahead, Monu.
Yeah, Ramesh, I want to tell you very clearly, as far as I know political science, in a democracy, you change a government through an election. The person, whatever be the merits or demerits of the particular person, I would request you not to basically, wholesale believe in what you're hearing about Ukraine. The situation is you have a very strong Ukrainian nationalist element in Ukraine.
Okay.
I say Ukrainian nationalists, they don't like Russian-speaking people. But about 40% of Ukraine is Russian-speaking.
Yeah.
They don't like that 40%. Let's say in India, East and West don't like each other, or North and South. Fortunately, we don't have that situation at all. Dr. Swamy is, all of us, frankly, we have lived most of our lives in North India, and we have felt perfectly at home. And North Indians come to the South, they feel at home. But the reality is, frankly, that this Ukrainian nationalism, what happened? Again, Ramesh, please don't get me wrong. Let me tell you very clearly. I am just looking at it in a dispassionate way. To say that the Americans were not, the Hillary Clinton in particular, she was very clearly trying to create what happened in the Maidan, lakhs of people congregating, violence, bloodshed. Of course, the Ukrainian police, the Ukrainian security services, if you've got violence and bloodshed in any city in India or any city in the United States, well, I certainly hope that you're going to have some counter to that so that this violence and bloodshed ceases. Now, Yanukovych is a Russian-speaking president. He was Russian-speaking, but he was elected. And he was removed from office through the power of the street. Now, once you legitimize the power of the street to remove a head of state or a head of government, you are legitimizing anarchy. So I'm sorry, Ramesh. Number one. Number two, you're asking about Russia. Well, according to the information I have, and as Dr. Swamy knows, he and I have been in touch with friends in Russia for decades, if I may say so. The next target after the successful Ukraine coup against elected President Yanukovych being toppled by street mobs was Putin in Russia. So the next mobs would have been in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, in Kharkov, various other cities in the Russian Federation. Now, you may believe that, for example, what happened to Mr. Gaddafi. You may be a saintly person and say, yes, even if I'm Gaddafi, I will forgive those who tortured me. Putin, I don't think, is a very forgiving person. And when he realized that the next target was himself, after Yanukovych fell, the next person to fall would be himself. I think the iron entered his soul, and he said, I am going to protect myself. And he did that by grabbing the Crimea and by strengthening the Russian-speaking people there. And may I say, Ramesh, that the native Ukrainian speakers treated the Russian-speaking people as second-class citizens. I would not even say second class. I'd say 10th class citizens. Now, let us say you are in the United States. You are from India. say you are like Sree Iyer. Now, supposing he is treated because he's coming from India and he speaks Tamil as a 10th class citizen, Sree Iyer may not be very happy about that particular government in Washington. Fortunately, America is an open society despite everything, and everybody feels at home there. Certainly, when Lakshmi and I go there for visits, we feel very much at home there. We like the place, and if I may confess, we like the going to China as well, quite very frankly, and because we like the Chinese people, we like their culture. We're not very happy with Xi Jinping, but we like China and the Chinese people. But I'd like to say very, very clearly, there was a very good reason behind Putin taking hold of the Crimea, because according to his information, they were going to join NATO. And then you'll have American troops and all kinds of other troops being stationed right on the Russian frontier. And that will severely degrade the Russian security. So that is why this happened. So I want to say, Ramesh, let us be honest with you. Let's look at the whole picture. The problem that we have is we look at something on a 90-degree lens or maybe a 180-degree lens. You have to look at everything through a 360-degree lens. And if you look at the Ukrainian issue from a 360-degree lens, this narrative that democracy won, Yanukovych was elected. Democracy won without election by street power. You had this Arab Spring. I forecast in the very first days of the Arab Spring that watch out, this is going to become a Wahhabi winter. And the Muslim Brotherhood, which is not even a Muslim organization, it's a Wahhabi organization, was very strongly strengthened by the so-called Arab Spring, another of Hillary Clinton's pet projects. So my request is very simple, Ramesh. Let's not look at only one side of the picture. Now let's come back to the Quad. I think the fear of Dr. Swamy and Mr. Sree Iyer about the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, and I'm quite clear that yes, I do support him. I do believe he's a good Prime Minister. But I'd like to say very clearly, the fear is that India will be the odd man out in the Quad. That you'll have Japan, Australia, and the US on one side, India on the other. And on the surface, there is a lot of circumstantial evidence that goes to that. The latest, for example, was India rushing like a marathon runner. I mean, you have this 100-yard dash, and you had Roger Bannister, I think, breaking the record. I think India broke the record for being the first country to immediately say, no, we are definitely going to be in the Beijing Olympics. Definitely, 100%. Even the rest of the world says, no, we are going to be there. Of course, we may not get any medals, it's a different matter, but we will be there. And I'm sure that some VIP or the other, because the Chinese treat VIPs very well, they would have had a wonderful visit. I remember once Dr. Swamy, myself, and Jagdish, and we went, and Lakshmi, we all went because we wanted to see Mount Kailash. And Dr. Swamy is a VIP, and Jagdish and I are very insignificant persons, but we were all treated very well. So the reality of situation is very, very clear. The point is, we in what I have understood is that we are not the odd man out. There's a lot of activity going on behind the scenes to integrate India into the supply chain, integrate India into the defense infrastructure. But for some reason, this is something that is not being talked about loudly by the present government. Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister Jaishankar have never mentioned China's name. The reason that is given is, quite frankly, that they don't want to go the wolf warrior way of China. They don't want the Chinese to have even the fig leaf to say that India is aggressive. So they want to avoid that. So the entire world knows it is China that is aggressive. Now, you may not like that logic, but that is, in any case, it's an argument. It's a logic. And that is the reason why both have been silent about China. But I have reason to believe they have been very active on the US front, on the Japan front, and on the Australia front. That is what I am led to believe. I am outside government. I have to rely on information that comes to me and they may be right or not. I can't directly check up because I'm outside government. But the reality is that, in my view, Prime Minister Modi fully understands that the security of India cannot be assured in the absence of a clear partnership with other like-minded countries. I'm not going to use the word democracies. Vietnam is a like-minded country. It's hardly a democracy. Some countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman is not a democracy, but it's a like-minded country to India. Mohammed bin Salman has said the Tablighi Jamaat is a terror organization. We have not said that in India. In fact, we allowed the Tablighi Jamaat to have a huge jamboree, a huge gala. And of course, the chaps in that gala were blamed for the Delta variant. I don't think they were responsible, frankly. The Delta variant was caused by various other issues. I'm not going to go into that now. But the fact is that the Saudis have said Tablighi Jamaat is a terror organization. India has not. So that is a like-minded country, in my point of view. It is against Wahhabism. And therefore, I'd like to say, Ramesh, a lot of the work, in my understanding, is taking place. For some reason, the Prime Minister is taking it on a very low key. But I do not believe he's inactive, and I do not believe he has any lack of understanding about the security challenges facing India. Now,
is Russia a like-minded country?
As far as BRICS is concerned, I think it is well realized that the Chinese have a complete chokehold on BRICS. But why, as I said, why make a big thing and leave it? Be there and wait for better times. And hopefully, if we have a good set of policies, a good matrix of policies, and some of the holdovers that are still there in the government, very frankly, and some of the influences in the government that are still of the past. I remember when Prime Minister Modi took over and he formed his government, I said publicly, this is a 20% Modi government, 40% Manmohan Singh, 40% Vajpayee. Well, today it's about 30% Modi, it's about 40% Vajpayee still, and the balance is still Manmohan Singh. So I'd like this government to be 100% Modi. I know that, some people here are not going to like that, but I would like it to be 100% Modi. It's still only 30% Modi in the government led by Modi. And that is one reason why whatever happens in India, any problem in India, that's the fault of this guy called Narendra Modi. Well, frankly, even if you have, even if you work 23 and a half hours in a day and a night, you're not going to have the time to solve 1,000th of the issues that are there on the table of the government. And very frankly, I'd like to say, and nobody can do that. So this, putting all the blame on this one individual, I think is wrong. If certain policies have not been good, I think I have been very forthright about demonetization. I've been very forthright about GST. I've been very forthright about lockdowns. But overall, I'd like to say, I believe the direction is positive, and that is where, in my opinion, I'm very happy to participate in a place where, again, you have brilliant minds like Dr. Swamy, who also give a very clear direction. So I'd only like to say, I make no apologies for not basically believing that the Prime Minister is responsible for all the problems in India, or that he's not aware of the fact that you must have a military alliance. You cannot keep the Indo-Pacific free, open, and inclusive without a show or use of military force. It's not possible. It's like saying you can live without oxygen or you can live without food and water. You can't. So the military is implied. It is not explicit. So whether it should be explicit or not is a matter of debate. I believe it should be much more explicit than it is. I'm very unhappy that we jumped and said we are going to the Beijing Olympics. So I've said, all right, if you want to go, send Kiran Rijiju. He's a very dynamic and younger minister. Send Kiran Rijiju.
And he's from Arunachal also.
I'm sorry?
He's also from Arunachal.
Well, Arunachal is an Indian state, Dr. Swamy.
I know, let the Chinese realize that.
No. Some scholars in India say, oh, we believe in one China policy. Then obviously they don't believe Arunachal and Ladakh or Sikkim are part of India. Oh, I'm sorry, all three are.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Nalapat. You have a clear point of view, and this is a democratic forum, and you can certainly speak in favor of Modi if you want. And none of us is going to object being a democratic forum. What about Arvind and
Yeah.
Jagdish?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. In fact, I would begin with what has been said earlier. Dr. Swamy started with the history of formation of BRICS and Quad. He said BRICS was formed in 2006 and Quad in 2007. The very reason that Quad was formed after 1 year of BRICS, that was basically to counter the impact of BRICS. But let me just tell you one thing. In fact, overall, this is first time that I'm hearing Professor Monu Nalapat talk about a balancing position despite of favoring Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He said, we have a lot of hopes from Quad, but let's hang on and remain in BRICS with the hope for a better future. But let me just tell you, what has Quad discussed in so many years? Whatever meetings of Quad that India has participated in, they have talked about security and stability, climate change, corona, vaccination, environment, sustainability, terrorism, space technology, and telecom, 5G and other things. Not one Quad meeting has discussed economic situation which will benefit India either in terms of trade, imports, or in terms of export. Now, look at the other hand. Dr. Swamy said India and China, if BRICS together form 41% of the global population. Of course, 37% comes from India and China alone, and 24% of GDP comes from India and China alone. Now, look at the India-China trade. We have been talking about Professor Nalapat's favorite Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has been talking about Atmanirbharta, Make in India, and so on other things. TikTok boycott, ban on Chinese apps, 60 odd Chinese applications in mobile phones were banned in the name of Atmanirbharta and Make in India, whatever. $100 billion we have touched in terms of trade. In fact, we have crossed $100 billion. And our dependence on China, look at that. 70% of our import of or use of smartphones comes from China. 70% of the medicine, bulk drugs, I've been talking about this in so many different programs, API, bulk drugs. 70% of the bulk drugs come from China. Automobile components come from China. Telecom components come from China. Average Chinese contribution in India's import is more than 20%. Can we afford to boycott China? Now, of course, Dr. Swamy has been advocating, supporting Quad, and by saying that whether it is BRICS or whether it is SCO, that is Shanghai Cooperation, Russia and China, they are the common members with India in these two organizations, BRICS and SCO. But at least the BRICS part, though Chinese dominate, Professor Nalapat, all along he has been saying that China dominates. And now when Dr. Swamy says that Russia is a junior partner, and if China and Russia come together, what is India's role? India's role is insignificant. India's voice cannot be heard either in BRICS or SCO. But when we look at the trade, when we look at the statistics, we find, can India afford to boycott Chinese trade? These statistics which I have just now mentioned. India's economy, to a large extent, we are not yet prepared to that extent that we ignore China. In fact, we all know that the not only very formation of Quad, but even whether it was Trump administration or whether it is Joe Biden administration, they have been trying to, pinprick China on one way or the other. Recently, Joe Biden appointed a coordinator for Tibet. And of course, Trump also had appointed a similar coordinator, but China does not take notice of these things. It doesn't matter. So I'm saying this pinprick between China and US will continue. Let us look at our interest. Let us look at our economic interest. Our economic interests suggest us that we cannot afford to boycott China, either in favor of Quad or in favor of any other organization. I would like Dr. Swamy and Professor Nalapat and Mr. Sree Iyer to comment on what I've just now said. Thank you.
Okay, let's hear Jagdish first, and then we'll come back to the comments. Jagdish.
My question is a lot of questions here on our chat box and all that. What is this? Why are India part of two organizations? Why can't we be either here or there? I mean, that is the common man wants to know. I want to know from both Professor Nalapat Sree Iyer and even Dr. Swamy. Then what is the advantage? Either you be with BRICS or be with Quad. Can't we have either this or that? Because Arvind Chaturvedi is saying that he's saying all those figures and all that is fine, but officially government is saying boycott this app, boycott that app, and all that. Is it not contradictory? If we cannot, then we should not be even boycotting that. The government should not be even boycotting that. One of our viewers is just now said it in our chat, saying that no, these boycotts are only for the common man. The government does all these deals at higher level. The boycott is only for the common man, the Chinese goods of Chinese app. So I want to understand, why can't we be either this side or that side? Why on both?
Yes.
Professor Nalapat, can you tell us about it? What is this? Why are we part of both?
Well,
I think Dr.
who will
Swamy-
Sree Iyer?
Dr.
Would you
Swamy,
like
I
to say
think
respond?
you have to lead.
Actually,
Okay, do you want me to answer this question?
all right.
Yes, start with
answer.
yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So Dr. Swami's Panchatantra example of Panchatantra bat has really hit home. People have come down to the basics. Here's what I would have done, or I would have liked to do, is see, how is China become so powerful? They picked their renminbi to some artificial number, and they just kept printing currency notes after notes after notes after note. It is believed that they print 3 times the GDP of their that annual GDP is printed as notes, all in the name of building infrastructure. Now, if the West did not penalize China, why isn't India doing this stuff? If India wants to replace China and become Atmanirbhar, why isn't India saying we are going to peg our currency at this for 5 years? This will make things easier. I don't mind if it makes it 75. Today is only 73, 74. Make it 75. But you say for 5 years, this is going to be the same. People need that stability so that they can start planning long term. I mean, we've been talking for close to 8-9 months now about bringing a semiconductor fab in India, and I'm already seeing 4 other places now, trying to do the same thing. We can't take this long. You have to do it fast. Mr. Modi did this thing overnight. Remember Singur? He got the entire Tata plant to move from one corner of the country to the exact opposite. He did this. I'm looking for that Modi. This is how I see it.
Yeah. Well, let me add to this. Let's look at China itself. Between 1971, when Kissinger turned up in Beijing in one of those famous secret visits, and the thaw began, China was a pussycat as far as United States is concerned. The best example is in WTO. The Americans laid down, these are the things that you have to agree to, only then we will make you a member of WTO. And they signed every one of them. And throughout the period, if you see up to, say, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the Chinese have always sided with the United States in the United Nations, in the Security Council, in trade matters and so on. And what did the Americans do for them? They said, you don't have any industry, the Cultural Revolution has ruined it all, and Mao Zedong has made it worse. So what we will do for you is that we will tell East Asian countries, don't export directly to the United States. Export your semi-processed goods, not processed goods, to China. China will then do the final. This take for example the computer. The circuits come from Taiwan. They put the keyboard, the screen, the cover, and write Lenovo made in China. Almost everything that China produced in the beginning, up to say the year 2002, 2003, was semi-processed goods coming from East Asia, coming to China, and then value added and exported at a much higher price to the West. That's it. So they were in deficit with East Asia in balance of trade, and they were in huge surplus with the West and Europe. That's how China grew. So therefore, what I'm saying today to you is we have a security problem. The Chinese are here. They have crossed what they have sworn to obey, namely or honor, and that is the LAC. And the LAC in Arunachal was, of course, the McMahon line, and the LAC for Kashmir, Ladakh was specifically drawn by Jiang Xiying, the military man who was then the president, and came and they that has been violated. They have crossed it, come across. Now what is the difficulty in saying that this has happened? What is the great diplomacy that we are following? In fact, we are discrediting ourselves. The public has come to know. Military men who have suffered injuries they have come and said. People who lost their loved ones in Galwan, they have come and said. So, the word is now widespread in India that the Chinese have come and occupied our territory, despite Modi meeting 18 times Xi Jinping and 5 times going to China on visits for big conferences. So, who has made the fool of us? It's obviously the Chinese who have. And not one country is willing to explicitly condemn China for this. So you have no friends, and because everybody is your friend. So I am saying time has come to choose. The Americans are only good for giving you weapons. Tell the Americans we will take care of China, but we need weapons. And I'm sure that that is what you will get. That is what you want, and that's what you will get. They have much better weapons than what you're getting from Russia. Russia may not, Putin may be an independent personality, but he is so heavily in debt to China after the sanctions imposed by the United States that I don't think he can wriggle out of obeying China. There's not a single decision he has taken in multilateral matters in the world where he has gone against China. Even in our discussion with us, he has taken the same line with the Chinese stake on everything else. In fact, the last visit of Putin came for 1 day only. He said to Modi, which I have learned from sources, that the Chinese will not go back. And so what you need to do is draw a new LAC and not make an issue of that. That is what the advice he gave to Modi. And after all this, if you go to Beijing Winter Games and also go for a trilateral meeting with the other, I'm afraid you will lose all credibility all over the world. Yes, Ramesh, you want to say something?
Dr. Swamy,
No, sir, I'm good.
may I just cut in on Ramesh? Ramesh, you're talking about, I think, Joe Biden. I think Sree was mentioning about Joe Biden, and he was not very happy with Mr. Biden. Well, let me say that Biden ran away from Afghanistan and frankly, he made a mess of things. And I think that was on the advice of, as you correctly said, the group that we are talking about, the Pakistan group, which is very, very strong in the Pentagon, State, White House, etc. No doubt about it. It's not only with Bernie Sanders, it's been there as a part of the American system for decades, for several decades, you know that. So, including some important people from California. So, the reality is that Biden was told by this lobby that you will be such a popular president, you will be able to withdraw from Afghanistan, you won't have any casualties. Americans are fed up of this never-ending war, and instead of which Biden has become a figure of fun, an object of ridicule, because the way he ran away from Afghanistan and the entire credibility of the United States with Biden as commander in chief took a knock. So the good news is Biden now understands that following the dictates of that particular lobby is going to send him into a political pit and the Democratic Party into complete collapse in the 2022 midterms. Forget the 2024 presidential election. So that's a good inoculation, if I may say so. A good antidote has been administered by his mistake in Afghanistan, which was caused by the advice of this particular lobby that Sree has very correctly pointed out. But so far as India is concerned, I think Biden is very clear. Now, let me be frank with you. Now, Arvind was talking in terms of the trade with China, etc. Arvind, the fact is that when you are hopelessly in debt, now one thing you can do is to try and get some bank which doesn't know your debt status to give you some more credit cards, so you can go even more into debt. Or the same bank will give you one more credit card and finally take over your house and all the property inside it. I'm not very sure that would be very good. The reality is, today we have a golden opportunity, an even bigger opportunity than China had in the 1980s, and which China took full advantage of. We have got a bigger opportunity now. There's a huge decoupling taking place from China. Tech companies in particular cannot locate in China, and in 3 or 4 years, they will not be able to sell their equipment except to China, to Russia, to Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan is a great big market. So selling to Pakistan, I'm sure all American companies would love to sell to Pakistan. I mean, if their CEOs are not entirely the best to have. But I'd just like to point out, in this situation, India is the ideal alternative. But for that, our signaling has got to be right.
Yeah.
One problem that I'm seeing with every government, including this government, is the implicit belief that it's only officials talking to each other and the ruling structures talking to each other. Presidents to presidents, prime ministers to prime ministers, secretaries to secretaries. I mean, secretary, undersecretary in the US case, secretary is a cabinet minister, and head of government to head of government. Sorry, in a democracy, it's everybody. And if you don't give proper signaling so that everybody across the world understands the signaling, well, you may be able to give any kind of signaling to the government, head of government, to the officials, to the politicians. And at the end of it, the public is going to say, we don't want this country. We don't want to be a partner of this country. So that is where I'd like to say it's very important that the Modi government have an all of society signaling, and they involve civil society also in that signaling. Now, and not make it completely, if I may say so, government to government signaling, and a lot of that signaling is under the iceberg. It's under the waterline. If it's under the waterline, people don't know it. They can't appreciate it, and they don't believe it's real. And then one day there will be a consequence of that. It is, for some time you can keep going on the basis that there is no alternative. Frankly, the biggest favor that was done to the BJP was when Rahul Gandhi was declared by the Congress party to be the prime ministerial candidate. I think the BJP will be praying that Rahul Gandhi will again be declared by the Congress party as a prime ministerial candidate. I think that would be, frankly, give the BJP several points, advantage over any other party. But the reality is that your signaling has got to be people to people. In a democracy, it's only government to government, and most of it is secret. And as a consequence, across not only the world, I've been hearing this now for about 3-4 years, pretty nasty comments all over the world. At least about 3 years, not 4 years, about 3 years. And now I'm hearing it in India over the last 2 years, and especially in the last 6 months or so. A lot of very negative comments are coming about the government, in my view, substantially because they don't know what the government is doing. But that's not something that is a good thing. Government has got to understand that. And frankly, if our signaling is wrong, the benefit that Quad can offer of India being integrated into a security and economic structure, the way China integrated itself in the 1980s, India can integrate itself via the Quad in this century. But it will not happen unless the signaling is right. And I must confess, I agree the signaling is not right so far, but I must end by saying I still have confidence that Prime Minister Modi will ensure a proper signaling in the next year or so. And so that 2022 becomes India's year for the decoupling to be coming to India in a massive way.
We're running out of time. Anybody wants to make a short comment?
No, Dr. Swamy, it won't be short. So
Well, it's already 9:25.
yeah, no, I don't want to do it. Let's do it. It's okay. We'll take it for another.
Arvind, you may kindly wind up.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to have Professor Nalapat and Sree Iyer with this program. Dr. Swamy is part of the host team also in a way. And Dr. Swamy initiates the discussion and raises the point which he did today. And it was such an enlightening discussion. And I'm sure our viewers will also be happy and benefited by this discussion. Maybe we are touching almost about 90 minutes, but you see these topics see no end actually in discussion. And there are so many issues involved, entangled in one and another, that it is very difficult to conclude and develop some kind of consensus. Consensus is not the idea of this kind of program. This kind of program is basically to provoke people to think and come to a conclusion. I mean, there are many issues, and experts only give advice, their opinion, and it is not necessary that all the opinions should converge on one point. Maybe. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Thank you, Mr. Sree Iyer, Professor Nalapat, for such a wonderful discussion today. And maybe we'll continue this topic some other time. Last week, we had a discussion on China, and even that discussion went into about 90 minutes. But only thing is inconclusive. So maybe a global issue and geopolitics, these are the issues which never end. And therefore, we'll continue. We'll meet some other day. Next Sunday, we'll be meeting again at 8 o'clock. Thanks, Jagdish Shetty ji. Thank you, Ramesh Swamy. Thanks, the technical team led by Ashish, Tejas, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, Ajesh Nair, and Swaminathan. We'll be meeting next Sunday again, 8 p.m. Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga, with a new topic, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, and a new guest, a new topic. Thank you very much. We'll be meeting next Sunday. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.